Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank Podcast. Reginald, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Would you like to introduce yourself to everyone out there listening?
Thank you very much. My name is Reginald Mombrun. I am right now what they call the RGR, the Visiting Professor of Law at North Carolina Central University. Is just a fancy name that they give you a little extra money. Not a whole lot of money, just a little bit extra money. My background, do you want me to talk about my background in general, or what? How much you
Yeah, a
take?
little bit about yourself if you want to say how we got interested in getting to the main topic, which is talking about Big Pharma.
Okay, a little bit myself. I'm a tax lawyer by training. Obviously, as a lawyer, I went to law school, that kind of stuff. I get my master's in tax at the University of Florida, and then but and then I've been teaching for about 20 years now. And when you teach, I kind of shift a little bit toward policy, not just hardcore tax law, but a little bit of policy. And so I've written books on corporate tax. I've also written a book on Haiti, about my country, just dealing with policy, politics. And then my latest article, I wrote on Big Pharma, pharmaceutical companies, essentially the challenges that they pose for the health of the country. So that's where you picked up the article.
Now, about Big Pharma, though, how'd you get interested in looking into Big Pharma and talking about it? Because if you talk, everyone knows about Big Pharma. We all joke around and we all know the stereotype of big pharmaceuticals. They only want money and stuff like that. But also, depending on what area it is, it kind of can get lumped into some like, oh, they're not all just in it for the money. I was like, I've spoken to some academics who would look at you like you're a conspiracy theorist if you start talking about Big Pharma. I'm like, well, it's just business. We know about tobacco studies back in the day. I mean, they were all slanted. They have a whole dark history, but with pharmaceutical drugs, it's a large part of our country, especially in the United States. I think we're one of two countries in the world that advertise pharmaceutical drugs. And it's a money incentive. It's a very bad thing to have in what you would call the pillar of health.
Oh yeah, I think right. The one thing I like to say when I talk to people about that, about conspiracy theory, the one thing I like to say about that, conspiracy theories are wrong until they're right.
Yeah.
That's my favorite quote. And so, for example, I'm sure you heard about the U.S. government making just basically testing blacks in the 50s for syphilis, right? Well, no one believed that. No one actually believed that until the FDA actually
Yeah.
find
They did it on all prisoners too. They just went there's a big thing with pharmaceutical drug testing on prisoners. And when I say that, people go, "Oh, that sounds like a conspiracy." I'm like, "Look it up. The whole US Justice Department has a whole file on it."
Exactly. So that's the thing. Conspiracy theory, to me, when you say conspiracy theory, that means that you're being lazy intellectually. You don't really want to research. But anyway, so the reason I get started in that is because I have high blood pressure, right? And the whole high blood pressure thing is kind of very interesting. I don't know if you ever heard about the big passage. I don't know if you ever heard of that. No, the big passage obviously it's a theory because the reason for that is scientifically it cannot be proven. But anyway, but bottom line is what happens is a large number of African Americans have high blood pressure, a very large number. And then when you look at Africa, where African Americans generally come from, they don't have such a prevalence of high blood pressure. And the question is, wait a minute now, you pretty much have the same DNA. Why is it African Americans have such high blood pressure, whereas Africans themselves don't have that? And so what the theory come up basically say, well, during the slave trade, during the Great Passage, that's what some people call it, what happens is they put a lot of slaves in the bowels of the ships. And what happens is those that tended to survive were those that tended to have high blood pressure. And the reason for that, because when you have high blood pressure, you have a tendency of sweating a little bit more. And sweating is a cooling mechanism. That's how the body actually cools itself by sweating, which is a good thing. That's why when you run, you sweat, your body gets cool. Those that didn't have high blood pressure, that mechanism wasn't working as well, and so therefore they tended to die. So it was almost like a natural selection process. Again, this is just a theory. You can't test that theory, obviously, but it kind of makes sense. Anyway, so I have high blood pressure. I've been going to the doctor for that, and then I did a little bit of research in terms of finding exactly there were a lot of generics, and I started talking to my doctor about the generics, because the generics were much cheaper. And I told him, I was very upfront, I'm not trying to self-medicate. I am not a doctor. I was very clear. I did not do well in biology. That's why I'm not a doctor. And I said, I'm not trying to medicate myself, but I want you to explain to me why am I not on generics as opposed to the regular procedure. And then he went back and forth. He just couldn't really explain it. It was not a valid explanation. And he finally put me on the generics. which are the same equivalency as the brain name drug that was on. And then when I started doing some research, I realized there's money involved. There's money involved. The brain name drugs cost a lot more, and there's money involved. And if they can get doctors to prescribe that, the insurance companies really have no choice. It's going to be very hard for the insurance company to push your doctor and the patient to accept generic drugs. All right, because again, so that's what I started looking at it, and I realized it was all about money, and it was shocking to me that it was not only just about money. And I've read tons of articles, and what they basically concluded is that doctors are just really drug peddlers, no more than that. And so that's kind of shocking that to me, and that's why they look into it.
I noticed it when I was in a doctor's office and this person came in with like a whole briefcase of just drugs and like pamphlets and all this. Try this thing. It's coming out soon and it's going to be like this. And I'm like, why do I feel like I'm in an actual real-time advertisement? It was like scary to notice that. But then I started noticing that doctors do get an incentive for pushing certain drugs. But I don't know where that relationship starts from, where they enter into this. I mean, I'm not going to blame the doctor because that we're in a money needing world and we kind of pushes people to want money, but also I don't take it away from them saying that I cannot blame you because you are pushing drugs that are only going to be beneficial to line your own pockets. The same reason I just don't know when that relationship with Big Pharma got involved into these pillars of health.
That's really excellent. It started from medical school, nurses, psychiatrists. In fact, I went on all of that business said the whole medical profession. The medical profession as we know it today was crafted for profit, literally crafted for profit, the whole medical profession, because essentially, basically what they want to do, pharmaceutical companies, they essentially wanted to control that. And so in the 1800s, you didn't have medical doctors, you had people that do different things, and people that are smart, it wasn't really organized. And then they literally created the medical profession and basically said, if you're not a medical doctor, you're basically a quack, without any scientific proof that what you did what actually worked or didn't work. And so that's how the profession gets started. And then they essentially train them from day one to essentially giving pills. The doctor that I have right now, he's a little better, but my doctors always want to prescribe pills for every single thing. Every single thing is a pill. And matter of fact, as we report that business says, somebody, I think a big CEO of a pharmaceutical company said, there's only two kind of people: those that have medical conditions and those that don't know it yet. And so that's what we're saying. And let me give you another example. Cholesterol, for example, cholesterol, you have a certain level of cholesterol, that kind of stuff. When in the 60s, they changed the level of cholesterol that was considered quote unquote. They changed the level that was considered quote unquote dangerous. And they had a committee. The committee was essentially packed with pharmaceutical people. And so what they essentially did, they lowered the threshold for quote unquote dangerous cholesterol. They made it much lower. And the result now is about, I was reading an article that basically says about 3/4 of our Americans, 50-year-olds or older, are under some kind of medicine. 3/4.
I would even raise that up a little bit. I think I'm 25 and most kids my age right now are on one or two prescribed drugs. Whether it's a depression thing, whether it's an anxiety thing. I actually gave my friend some not medical advice, but I noticed I have ADHD, but we have like these kind of similar qualities I noticed about her. And she's taking anxiety medication, depression medication, like 5 other things. And I go, ask your doctor about ADHD. I bet that one might fix everything that you're taking. I'd rather you be taking one. Honestly, I'd rather you not be taking any, but I'd rather you be taking one over 15 different ones. And now she's only on one because it turns out she did find out she has ADHD. I was like, that's the thing, though. Is anybody focused on that? Or you have a problem, they go, okay, here's what we usually use for that problem. It's like, where's the individual care?
Yeah, exactly. It's about money, push pills. And there's I was doing some articles, and what they find out actually is that there are people who die in the 80s, 85, 86, 85, 87, which is the normal lifespan. And when they did autopsy, they realized that they had cancer. They had untreated cancer, right? And they were able to live a regular lifespan. And so, so obviously that research was shut down because the idea that we have cancer, chemotherapy, all that stuff. And so what the person was basically saying, well, wait a minute now, there's some people that can actually live with cancer and live a quote unquote normal lifespan. If you can live a quote unquote normal lifespan with cancer, what's the point of the cure? What's the point of the cure? And so but obviously the pharmaceutical industry is fighting that tooth and nail because they want the cure. And so I mean, it's obviously very, very, very complex. And the only thing is they have the advantage because they have the quote unquote medical experience. They have the medical experience, they have the medical terminology. And by the time, and also more importantly, it's all about politics. It's all about, now they call it policies, but it's politics. And unfortunately, the pharmaceutical company controls the Congress completely. And again, that's another quote unquote conspiracy theory. Well, I'll tell you what, if I were to ask you how much money does it take to control the Congress, what would your answer be? How much money does it take? How much money do you have to quote unquote control the Congress?
At least close to a mill.
No, a little bit more than that. Somebody did the calculation. It's about $1.5 billion. If you have $1.5 billion, and the reason for that because every congressperson has to raise about $3 to $4 million for re-election, and re-election is every 2 years, right? And so it's a huge problem because you have to raise that every 2 years. Well, if you're a pharmaceutical company, you have $1 billion that you can actually you can give $1 million here, $1 million there. You can have a huge impact, and that's what happens. The U.S. government is literally captivated by the private sector, and I know that for personal insight. It's not a conspiracy theory.
Well, see what you're saying right there. People would call that a conspiracy, that it's Big Pharma's funded Congress, and it's like, think of it from like a strategic standpoint. You have people that are worried about feeding themselves and feeding their families and making themselves richer. They're not worried if a bill that gets passed might have some dangerous effects to it or might not be responsible. They're going to take the cash over the ethics of it.
Exactly. And then not only that, Congress is really about having a seat at the table. That's
Yeah.
where the power really is. Having a seat at the table. And also, again, you have lobbyists writing the law. A lot of laws are written by lobbyists, not by congresspersons. Because if you think about it, the average congressperson, they don't know anything about medical laws and all that stuff. For example, when they voted on Obamacare, well, the Obamacare law itself is about 4,000 pages long. I can guarantee you that the 95+% of the Congress people did not read the law.
I get 100%, not 95.
You know what I mean? You can't read that law because it's just too complex. I'm a tax lawyer by training, right? That's what I do for a living. That's what I've done for about 40 years. And I had really a hard time reading that thing. It's just huge. All kind of exceptions and exclusions. And so basically what I'm saying is the federal government is captivated by the private sector, and it's all about making money. It's unfortunate, but again, every time you talk like that, well, you're just a conspiracy theorist. You're just a conspiracy. Again, I don't know what that means.
I want to ask about when you were examining the connection with politics. I mean, were you shocked to find out that there were like kind of these incentives or influence into obviously people that are writing policies and directing it, or were you just kind of like aware of it just from the business aspect?
Not at all. And the reason for that, because I worked for the IRS. I worked for the IRS for about 15 years, and I was a manager in the national office, and the IRS is controlled by the private sector, literally controlled by the private sector. And they have different ways of doing it. The big way of doing it, they call that the revolving door, right? And the revolving door essentially means you got a young whippersnapper coming out of law school, that kind of stuff. They go to the IRS. They have to pretty much make a commitment of 4 years to the IRS. You pretty much have to make a commitment because it takes that long to train you, that you're gonna actually become productive, right? Like it's very complex, that kind of stuff, right? So anyway, so they go there for 4 years, but the whole time they're looking at what? The private sector. They're looking at big law firms, big firms. That's where they're gonna make their money. And so to me, it was just extraordinary. They had more respect to the private sector attorneys than they have for their own IRS government bosses, because they know, they think about it. This person thinks, what, I'm gonna have probably a 30-year career, right? In my 30-year career, I'm gonna spend 4 years at the IRS, 26 years in the private sector. And not only that, the money that they're going to make in the private sector is about 4 or 5 times what they make in the IRS. So therefore, they were in the IRS for the training only. And so every single, and then in addition to that, they have this, I guess, unwritten rule that if you want to be a high official in the IRS, it cannot happen going through the ranks. Not going to happen. If you want to be chief counsel of the IRS, it's not going to happen. It is impossible to become chief counsel of the IRS to work your way through. Not going to happen. You have to come from the private sector. It's an unwritten rule, but that's just the way it is. I was there 15 years, and I think I saw maybe 8 or 9 chief counsels, every single commissioners also. Every single one of them came from the private sector. Every one of them. Right. And so that and then you look at that and you kind of expand that to all it's everywhere. All government agencies are the same. Right. And so now they have gas and private sector is smarter. They got all kind of crazy notions on that. But that's how the government in these United States work. And that's from somebody from the inside. I don't know if you go to conspiracy, that's what I saw. That's what I saw. Every single chief counsel, so.
The conspiracy labeling on something like this is surprising, but I think it's because people don't want to know, or they're a bit afraid of knowing of how deeply connected it is. Like we mentioned earlier about kind of the establishment and the start of it, but then we start getting into like the ramifications. And in my opinion, I think it's really worse today. I mean, I was just watching TV with a friend, and we saw a pharmaceutical company, well, 3 pharmaceutical ads back to back, basically. But one of them, they just said the side effects slowly: temporary blindness, paralysis, and in some rare cases, death. And I just looked over at her. I was like, did you just hear that? They used to say them fast. Now that was just, they just said it. They didn't even nobody's going to pay attention. They're going to play a Reese's Pieces ad next, and we're all moving on to the next thing. So I'm curious what you think, some dangers or the ramifications of having this go on for so long. Because obviously, if we talk about the health of the country right now, it's not very good. There's a lot of people that are in really bad states of health right now. And I don't know if this is just from a long time pushing of, I don't know, certain drugs or something of that sort.
Well, yeah, I mean, what it is like what you realize that people are not paying attention. Just like I remember the first time, and also the ad thing were essentially that what they had to actually essentially admit those disclosures. That actually came under Obama. That actually came under Obama. That actually came on as part of the Obamacare, where essentially basically what they were doing, they were negotiating back and forth, and also I don't know if you remember, Bill and Hillary Clinton tried to get health care. Right, they try to get it. I don't know if you remember that, but well, you look fairly young, so you probably don't remember. But anyway.
25, so I wasn't really.
Oh yeah. You want to go? Yeah, exactly. So the bill and I mean, the whole healthcare thing has a long history, that kind of stuff. But anyway, I'm not going to go to the history. But anyway, Bill and Clinton is actually, that's one thing you want to do. He essentially wanted to do healthcare, expand healthcare, and so then what he did, he put Hillary Clinton in charge. Right, he put Hillary Clinton in charge, but she had some policy issues, that kind of stuff, and so. That whole thing got started. Well, what they did politically, they killed her, they destroyed her, they bludgeoned her politically. They had ads against her and all kinds of stuff. So the whole thing they collapsed. And those ads were mostly funded by the pharmaceutical companies, right? They funded those ads. There was an ad that was very popular where you essentially saw a couple talking about, now that they regulated healthcare, I can't get my pills now anymore, that kind of stuff. It's silly stuff, right? But anyway. So the whole thing collapsed. Bill Clinton paid a heavy-duty political price for that, and he gave it up, right? He gave it up. Well, Obama came, wanted to pick it up, and they wanted to pick it up, and they did not. They wanted to succeed. They wanted to quote unquote succeed, right? They didn't want to fail. Well, the first thing they did is they made a deal with the pharmaceutical company. That's the first thing they did. They made a deal with the pharmaceutical company, and the pharmaceutical company essentially which was incredible. They agreed to fund the expansion of healthcare. So the pharmaceutical companies got together. They basically said, we're going to give you guys $90 billion, right?
That's like your drug dealer paying for rehab.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. Absolutely. Absolutely. So the pharmaceutical companies agreed to give $90 billion, but what they get in return, they get access to millions of new customers, right? And pretty much in terms of the prices, they can charge any price they want. No restriction on prices. They have some medicines now that cost $84,000. Some medicine that costs our medicine costs a lot more than in Europe. But anyway, so that's how this thing got passed. Because the pharmaceutical company got involved. They definitely put some money, but they got a lot more. And so, but it was a political compromise. And so that's a thing. But so I mean, it's really extraordinary. But I guess if you think about it, beyond conspiracy theory, right? People talk about conspiracy theory. When you say conspiracy theory, that essentially means that you don't really want to think about anything. You basically reach a conclusion. But if you think about it, these are big, rich, powerful companies, right? And of course, they're gonna have their say. How can you have a multi-billion-dollar industry and you have some government regulating the industry and the industry not having a say? I mean, I think they have to have a say. They're not going to let some government bureaucrats, quote unquote, destroy the industry, especially when they have lobbyists. And so that's the problem. The other problem is they've just gone too far. That's the problem. They've gone too far.
What would you suggest be some roadblocks or some fixes that help kind of this direction go in the opposite way, where we can actually have this detachment of the pharmaceutical industry and so many things that we should be holding in high esteem, like our health industry?
Yeah, well, what I did in my article, I essentially said, I look at a bunch of things, a bunch of problems. There's obviously a bunch of legal problems. There's a bunch of constitutional problems, like the taking
Somebody's
stuff.
losing money. That's what's going to happen.
Oh yeah, exactly. And so what I basically said, I said, well, if you really want to fix this problem, this is how you have to fix it. You essentially have to take away the money incentive because I've got some stats here. Let me see if I can read the stats real quickly. Yeah, I've got some stats here where it basically says, yes, the pharmaceutical companies, I guess between 2006 2019, they spent about $288 billion in research. $288 billion. And said that's the part of people that support them say, well, you know what? Look at all this money that we spend on research, right? Which is true. I mean, they've done some good things. But so again, they spent about $288 billion in research between 1996 and 2005. But in the same span of time, they spent $739 billion in marketing, right? About $300 billion in research, right? And about $700 billion in marketing. Do you see where the emphasis is?
I'm just so clueless as to who watches a pharmaceutical ad and go, that's what I need. I need this to stop me from having diarrhea. It's like, I think people already know the brands in their head. It's kind of like Coca-Cola. It's like a household name in some places that you don't really need to advertise that much anymore. Like when you see an advertisement for McDonald's, you're like, why are you guys doing that? It doesn't make sense. We see it every two steps we take. There's a McDonald's there. That doesn't make sense. But for pharmaceutical companies, I don't know why they even need to market. We shouldn't be having that in this country.
Well, the interesting thing about marketing, right? Marketing, again, you would think if McDonald's stopped marketing, people would stop knowing about them. That's the danger of not marketing. You think it's so ingrained into your brain, and the reason why it's ingrained in your brain is because they started marketing to you when you were a toddler. McDonald's. What's the big McDonald's thing? McDonald's. What do you call this guy? The big goofy guy, McDonald's. But anyway, the point really is they started marketing to you as a toddler. And then they keep doing that. But if they stop doing it, you would actually be, because I think what happens is in the marketing industry, there's so much noise out there. There's so much noise out there that they're afraid that if they stop making their own noise, people will forget about them. Particularly McDonald's, there's nothing really that says burgers. McDonald's, it's burgers because you've been sensitized to it. But can you imagine the first McDonald's that got opened? What the heck is that McDonald's? What is that about? So that's the danger of marketing. That's why they have to constantly put in your. Basically, what they would want to do is put it in your subconscious. That's the idea. So, but anyway, so
have you looked into that type of marketing that they do? It's called media marketing or manipulative marketing. They actually get like psychologists and things to try and find. They do it with there's a schizophrenia ad that it still sticks in my head to this day. I saw it. I think it came out like 2015, but it's a woman and she's talking to some friends. And it's an ad for schizophrenia medication, remember? And she's talking, and then she just immediately gets sad. And then she pops her head up from the table, and all her friends are gone. I realized it was schizophrenia. She was talking to a bunch of imaginary figures. And I was like, what is that? And it's like, it scares people about schizophrenia, but also if you have schizophrenia and you see that, you immediately go, oh, I want the voices to stop. And then next thing you know, she's walking with a little toddler and a dog, and she's having a happy life. And you see the drug get thing over. I was like, how did they even think about writing this, creating this, marketing this to people? But they actually did studies. I had academics on here talk about it, that they go and they interview and they talk to psychologists, get a panel, they get surveys, and they see what's the most effective way. If you see someone smiling, drinking a Coke, it's like a 50 something percent chance that someone's going to be more than willing to go buy that Coke.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so the point I was trying to make is that they do spend a lot of money on research, that kind of stuff. Although a lot of research is done by the government. We can get lost in that, but I guess what they call basic research, what scientists call basic research, is pretty much done at the governmental level. And basic research, I guess, from what I understand, it basically means when you're doing the research, but you don't really know where you are going to end up. You do the research, but you don't really know where you're going to end up. And what happens, it really is only the federal government can actually do that. Only the federal government get that kind of deep pocket. And then the research gets mature. That's when the private sector comes in, and that's when they can commercialize it. They can commercialize it. They can do. Let me give you a quick example. DNA, right? Well, the first guy that actually mapped the DNA, he actually mapped the DNA of a fruit fly. That's the first thing he did. He mapped the DNA of a fruit fly, right? And then he actually got a government grant. And they said, why do you want to map the DNA of a fruit fly? He didn't really have a reason. He really didn't have a reason. He just thought it was interesting. You know what I mean? In other words, he didn't see all that DNA thing that we talked about. So he did it, and then people picked up there, and then they realized, wait a minute, we can actually, it gets to a point where this DNA thing can be commercialized. And that's when the private sector jumps in. And that's a lot of local people don't realize when it becomes commercial. Again, we have another example. Elon Musk, right? Elon Musk is talking about going to space. Space is going to Mars, all that stuff. He's going to try to commercialize it. And I think there is some commercialization right now. Because you can go to space for $1 million, that kind of stuff, and hopefully. Anyway, the point is, you know how much billions of dollars NASA spent to get us to that level? It was big. So my point really is the government does a lot of that. And going back to the pharmaceutical industry, they spend a lot more money on marketing than they spend on research. A lot more money on marketing. So what happens is they want the biggest bang for the buck, and so now it becomes just a commercialization, just trying to sell products. And so my suggestion would be, you know what, this is how we can solve it. Again, I'm not necessarily sure that's going to happen, but if you turn them into non-profits, right? Basically, you know what, pharmaceutical companies, because of your impact on the national healthcare, this is something that's actually a national security issue. And so therefore, you have to be a nonprofit. You cannot be for profit. And so what we're going to do, we're going to keep the scientists, right? We're going to keep all the scientists, right? We're going to take the marketers, pretty much, reduce them next to nothing, and it's going to be run by scientists. And the scientists are going to be looking at, really, it should be a public sphere, a public kind of thing. I think what's best for the public. And again, we keep the scientists, forget about the marketers that go from doctors to doctors trying to push pills just to make money. But the whole point of going to doctors and doctors to push pills, it's not about health, it's about making money. But if you turn them into a nonprofit, then essentially the profit incentive is pretty much gone. Not completely gone, but pretty much gone. And then hopefully you'll get a better result.
Well, yeah, I think you can reduce the profit incentive of some of these pharmaceutical companies to the point where they're obviously not making a large amount from a lot of their stuff. But also, when it comes to, if you take it to a nonprofit or make it so the money is reduced down to a little, would you stop seeing so much marketing, and would you also stop seeing research as well too? I mean, they wouldn't have an incentive. The only reason that they're influenced so much is because there's such an incentive for them too.
Yeah, I know, but the thing is, when you flip it, what you essentially would have, you would have the Dr. Fauci-like characters being in charge of pharmaceutical companies. And so those guys are excessively interested in healthcare, interested in research, right? And then when it comes to the money, they will still make money. See, non-profit does not mean that you're not making money. No, some non-profits are extraordinarily profitable, right? And that's the misnomer. The only difference is what you do with your profit. That's the only difference. You take your profit, do you give it to the shareholders, to the CEOs, or do you take the profit and you put it into more research? You know what I mean? So let me give you an example. Let's say a nonprofit finds a cure for, I don't know, AIDS or cancer, right? Finds a cure for cancer. Well, yeah, that nonprofit is going to be tremendously wealthy. And that nonprofit is going to make a lot of money. And just because it's a nonprofit doesn't mean that, no, you're making a lot of money. You know, the difference is when you make the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 billions, right? What do you do with that money? That's the only difference, right? If it's a for-profit, the 8, 9, 10 billions goes to the shareholders and the CEOs and whatever. If it's a nonprofit, a large portion of it goes back into research. That's the difference. That's the difference.
Coming from nonprofits, when you talk about, like, for instance, do you think that like when they're researching a drug, they will put more money into researching something that's going to be more beneficial to them rather than something that might be more beneficial to the thing they're trying to treat?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That's a conspiracy question. People will call that a conspiracy question, that people are obscuring not the truth, but health in sense of for profit. But I just go, it's a smart strategy. I mean, a lot of these people that are involved in here, they're money motivated, obviously. They're not just doing it because they care about someone that they've never met before. It's, I believe there's people out there in our health industry that obviously care, but you become so closed off from everything else when you're making so much money that eventually it just kind of leads that. I think turning it into a nonprofit or reducing the profit incentive would slowly bring people back to reality of actually wanting to do what they originally signed up for healthcare to do.
Exactly. Matter of fact, I'm looking at my note. I know there's one CEO, Laurie Little. Laurie Little, she was the famous CEO of a pharmaceutical company. And what she basically said, you know what, our duty is to our shareholders. That's what she said. Our duty as a pharmaceutical company is to our shareholders. So our first duty is to make money, period. So that's what she was quoted as saying. And she said that she wasn't trying to hide anything. And so again, that's what it is. These are for-profit companies, and they are there to make money. Period. So it's not they're not out there to increase the public health. Now, they do a lot of things, a lot of marketing that they do. For example, one of the things they do is corporate social responsibility. Well, they spend a lot of money doing that, and basically we corporate social responsibility because we have the boys club, the girls club, blah blah blah. We give some of our free medicine to poor people. That's all marketing. But ultimately, they basically say our duty is our shareholders. We need to make money. We have to make money. And so that's where it becomes more challenging. So the question really is, if you have some kind of medicine that's not really the best medicine, it's all about making money. That's the problem. So if you shift the paradigm, so to speak, if you shift the paradigm where they become non-profit, so in other words, profit is not at the center of it all. Again, just because you're non-profit, you're still gonna make money. It doesn't mean that you're not gonna make money. It's just that what you do with the money, and also because if you think about it, talking about national health care, good Lord, I can't think of anything that's more important.
So if you could shift earnings from marketing to shift the earnings to more beneficial research, so they're not getting a large incentive.
And also the whole idea is, basically in this country, we had a notion at some point, and although it's changing, we're moving from that. There's certain things that should be, for example, corporations in general, in the beginning of, well, I don't know the time, in the beginning, corporations had to have a public purpose, right? I'm talking about in the 1900s, early 1900s, 1800s. To have a corporation, you had to have a public purpose. And the reason for that, because they recognize that a corporation basically is an assembly of individuals, and it can become very powerful very quickly. And they did not want a bunch of people to get together for their own profit. So therefore, now it's changed now. But it used to be that if you have a corporation, let's say you, Robbie, you wanted to have a corporation, you have to have a public purpose. Hey, you know what? This particular corporation is for the following public purpose, right? Well, we've changed that now, where essentially you can do a corporation just to make money, right? And so that's the challenge. If you shift the paradigm, shift the way of thinking, basically say, you know what? Okay, we're just going to be nonprofit. In other words, basically what I'm saying is that the profit part of it is no longer the centerpiece of it. All right. Doesn't mean that you're not going to make profit, but you keep the scientists. They're the ones that produce the products anyway. It's not the marketing team. You know what I mean? The marketing team. As a matter of fact, I have a young cousin who's a pharmaceutical salesperson. He makes a a lot of money. But he's not a scientist. He doesn't really care. You know what I mean? And so, but if you shift the paradigm where the scientists pretty much decide what to research, how to research, and again, I submit that whatever a medicine that you find, you're gonna make money. So it's not like are you kidding me? If you find a cure for cancer, well, whomever finds that cure for cancer is gonna be fabulously wealthy, right? The only thing is, as a nonprofit, you make your 10 billion, 50 billion. The only thing is, you have to put it back into research. So now you research the next thing, not just the next hot thing. Let me give you an example. Vaccines, right? Up to COVID-19, vaccines were pretty much a dead area of research for pharmaceutical companies because there wasn't enough profits, right? There wasn't enough profits. So basically, vaccines didn't really do the research. Now, COVID-19.
All right, careful with that subject. That'll get you flagged off YouTube. I don't want that to happen.
I know, but what I'm saying is there's so much money to be made, right? Because you're talking about vaccine for at least 300 million people, and not just one. So that's where the incident.
I will ask, what are your thoughts on pharmaceutical companies paying for their own research into their own drug? It would be a conflict of interest, but I've noticed some studies where they don't declare a conflict of interest. But if I look at who's funding the study, there are people and corporations that are like the tobacco industry did it. There's plenty of examples, things that the FDA has caught that has been serious problems of concerns when it comes to academics that are doing a certain survey to test a certain drug out. And the company that the drug that they're testing is funding the study. And yet no conflicts of interest were declared because these people considered themselves attached, even though their study is primarily funded by the drug that they're doing the study on. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, that's an obvious issue, and I know there has to be research, but I don't think they should be so connected with academia where they're funding their own studies as well, too. That's a big ethical concern.
It's a disaster. It's a disaster and a half. And the reason why it's a disaster and a half, because again, in my article, I look at this thing, and basically, again, because you control your own research, you control your own clinic. What pharmaceutical companies do, they do a lot of clinical studies, and it's a disaster. They've been able to hide deaths in clinical studies. The problem is, whomever asks the right question, that's the person that actually drives the research. You ask the right questions. For example, I don't know if you have a significant other or not, a significant partner. But anyway, if I had to ask you, have you stopped beating your partner? Well, yeah. I mean, how do you answer that? You know what I mean? You say yes, you say no. But anyway, so yeah, research and those pharmaceutical companies, it's a disaster. But it goes deeper than that because they're responsible. One of the things they also do is that they infiltrate what they call the what's the word? Yes, they infiltrate what they call medical journals, right? They sponsor medical journals. Which is a disaster. And the medical journals, they sponsor what they call physician educators. Right? If you're a physician, you also teach. They fund your research. I mean, so basically what they've done essentially they've bought people off. And so again, the problem with research, it depends on how you should research, it depends on how you show it, and you can pretty much show. I mean, what's Mark Twain, right? Mark Twain basically said there's three types of lies. There's lies, regular lies, there's dim lies, right? And you know what the third one is?
What?
Statistics.
Statistics.
That's the worst kind of lies. That's lies. That's a lie. Okay, Bobby just lied to me, Bobby. That's a dim lie, Bobby. Too bad. Bobby, you just showed me statistics. That's even the worst kind of lie, because you can manipulate the statistics. You can change it. So basically, they've done that in law research. The FDA have done that. The tobacco company was a fight to the death to make them realize. The oil company, they're even worse.
The sugar industry just for what was it, $50,000 completely ruined all. probably generations of people from understanding what good health is. I mean, they said that fat was bad for you and sugar wasn't causing you to get fat. All over $50,000, they manipulated studies and completely just messed up the whole health industry when it comes to our food.
Exactly, exactly. But again, people again, when you call it conspiracy theory, basically what you're basically saying, you know what, I don't want to think about this particular issue. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to do any research. I don't want to do any thinking. So basically, you crazy, and if I'm just going to call you that you're a conspiracy
Well,
theory.
you can't talk about it. I mean, I was going to ask you where you got your research from, like looking at things, because if you look up Big Pharma or anything like that, you'll come across some books, but they're not the top page results. They're a couple pages back. And the reason is because there is Big Pharma happening today. It's right in front of our faces. Now you can find information from what I've noticed. You can find historical stuff of in the past, the Sackler family and all those that are big corporations that everyone knows and acknowledges that there was Big Pharma back in the day. But then, like the past 10, 15 years, there's no talk of that on the internet. And I think it's a censorship issue with some of these tech corporations. I don't know if they have relationships with some of these pharmaceutical companies, but it made it hard to try and find information because I've talked to FDA whistleblowers. We'll get to the FDA later, but I want to ask where you got your information from. Obviously, when you're looking through and trying to search up stuff, I mean, they're not very open about showing it.
Oh yeah. That's a good question. Well, I get my information by essentially that, but essentially what you do as a researcher, you gotta dig, a little bit, you gotta dig, and that particular article took me. I think that particular article probably took me about 10 months to write, and so I had research help from students, and you gotta keep digging, and also I think what really helps, the senator from Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren. Right, she's also a big pharma kind of challenging person, but her and Bernie Sanders, her and Bernie Sanders, they're the ones that kind of they're the only ones that really been fighting them, and so therefore, so when you find something like that, then you gotta follow it. You gotta follow them. You gotta research them, follow them, research them, and they've introduced a lot of legislation to regulate big pharma. And then when you look at the legislation, the legislation a lot of times give you a lot of background, right? Because essentially, again, if you want to shift the paradigm, if you want to do a legislation against big pharma, well, what happens is that those particular legislation, there's a lot of research coupled with that, and so that's how we're able to dig and dig and dig and dig, and that's why we're able to find a lot of articles on those things, that kind of stuff. But it's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing where you can just Google. So no, they take research.
How do you get the public in on the discussion, though? Like, how do you stop people from labeling it a conspiracy? Because we're talking like this to me, if someone can sit and talk to you for an hour, they'll notice it's not so crazy, it's not so conspiratorial. It makes a lot of sense. But just getting people past that initial introduction or hump in the beginning to having the conversation, which I'm sure plenty of people talk about it and joke about it, and everyone knows the stereotype Big Pharma, but I don't know if you try and bring it up in public, people will start labeling you many different things.
No, I think you're right. It's very hard. Part of it is weird, to be honest. Part of it is really because of the success of the United States itself. United States, but particularly, I'm not from a country where I'm from Haiti. Haiti is definitely a failed country, no question about that. If you look at the United States, let me give you a typical example, right? At my school, right, every now and then they have a fire drill, right? They're a fire drill. Well, when they turn the fire drill, the normal reaction is annoyance. People get annoyed because it happens where in the middle of school, in the middle of a class, you're teaching. Now you have to stop. You have to go outside. Or it's right. It could happen right now. You know what I'm saying? Right now in the middle of the podcast. If they have a quote unquote fire drill, it's gonna be annoying. Because now we have to stop and maybe come back. But anyway, but the point is, what happens is because those kind of things are kind of become big, but it really reflects really a success because they've done so many fire drills, and fire drills have saved lives, and therefore people kind of put fire drills on the side, like, you know what, that's kind of annoying. Well, it's the same kind of thing. The United States has been more or less largely successful, right? And so therefore I get to a point where it's like, you know what, the government's working, I'm eating, you eating, there's some semblance of healthcare, and so therefore, okay, everything's quote unquote fine, right? And therefore, I don't want to hear how to make the country better. I just don't want to hear that. To me, that's kind of that's part of the problem to me.
Could I ask if you looked into the FDA at all, the Food and Drug Administration, to see
Oh
if they
my
were
God,
influenced?
absolutely. The FDA. Matter of fact, when I was talking about the revolving door, why Alex Azar, he's no longer there. That's a big example of what is the revolving door. Alex Azar, he was a big pharmaceutical executive. Right? Then he went to be pretty much the head of the FDA. So pretty much what happens over and over again is essentially they let the wolf in charge of the chicken coop,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
literally. Right? And so like those guys are very sophisticated. They don't go in there and they don't do anything crazy. But you have to realize, wait a minute, if you think about it, right? If you think about it, right, this particular person, and it happens thousands of times. Thousands of times. Matter of fact, I can give some examples of because I'm a tax lawyer. I work for the IRS. I don't want to name names, but those guys are quote unquote some of my peers because I bumped into them. But you got guys that left their private sector where they're making $1 million a year, right? They're making about $1 million a year. They come work for the IRS, and from $1 million a year, they went down to 150. They're quote unquote losing $850,000 a year. Now, why would you think somebody would do that? What would you think someone know? Because when they come back, they get rewarded because they put some rules that are in favor of their clients. Anyway, that's how it happened. So that guy, he was a big pharmaceutical company, went to be the head of the FDA, and he put rules and regulations that are actually in their favor. Or more importantly, he put rules and regulations that he knows about. A lot of it is about knowledge, how to navigate this thing. That's why lobbyists get paid a lot of money.
It's what we call legal speak, or those legal loopholes.
Exactly, exactly. They don't pay lobbyists because they're good-looking guys. You know what I mean? Or good-looking guys. No, because they know how to millet the rules, and so that's what happens. Yeah, yeah. And that happens to what government, and so therefore essentially basically the United States government is captivated by the private industry. There's no question about that. There's no question about that. They put rules, regulations. Again, I'm more familiar with the IRS side of things because that's where I work, but it's everywhere.
Well, you clearly wrote this article, but are you optimistic or pessimistic about the direction that it's going? I mean, obviously, if we don't get the knowledge out there and the information out there, like I talk about, censorship is an issue. Certain subjects you're not allowed to talk about, which I feel like should be expressed. All opinions should be expressed. You should hear people's perspectives and get information out there. And we're very quick right now to just label things like conspiracy talk or stuff of that sort, where I don't see any of my generation caring about the issues when it comes to health. I mean, I see a lot more people getting involved in the food discussion, looking more at the nutrition facts, like what is this in my food? What is this? What is this? But if you get into prescriptive drugs, everyone still takes a Tylenol when they get a headache. I'm not saying don't take it, but there's a lot of people that are just seeing something and they're insinuating that they have it, and then they go to a doctor and explain symptoms or something of that sort, and they get prescribed something that could have some serious side effects without even knowing the cause of what those side effects could be. They just kind of take it because it's going to get the pain to go away. And I'm like, well, you got to understand the both sides of the spectrum. It might help, but there's also these ramifications as well too.
Oh yeah, 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 absolutely. And again, part of it is because of the incredible marketing job that the pharmaceutical has done. Basically, what they basically say is two types of people: people that have a medical condition and those who don't know that they have a medical condition. So basically, it's a question of. I remember when I was in college, this particular professor, all he kept saying. I mean, he said that like maybe 100 times. It's all about marketing. It's all about marketing. That's what he kept saying. So he was getting a PhD in marketing. And that's what I kept saying. And now I understand 40 years later, I understand what they were saying. Saying, it's not having the best product. You can have the best product in the world. You can have a cure for cancer. You can literally have a cure for cancer. It means nothing if you don't have the right marketing behind it. Because again, you have a cure for cancer. It's the same always, well, I'm sure you read that in college. If a tree falls in the forest, does it make a noise? Well, yeah, same thing. If you have the cure for cancer, but no one cares about it, no one knows about it, no one is willing to push it, it means nothing. Literally nothing. And so that's the problem with the marketing part. But some of the good news is that I think the millennials, although I've kind of lost track of where we are now, we are X, Generation Z, I know where we are, but the millennials at one point, they seem to be less interested in profit and more interested in healthcare and that kind of stuff. So the idea is, okay, as the millennials age up a little bit, and as we become CEOs of companies, so maybe they might make some change. Because the change really has to come from within. I don't think the change comes from the outside, and so that's part of it. And also the other thing is a little bit more challenging thought is that in these United States we sort of have an understanding that the public has to be somewhat protected, I guess. You know what I
I don't
mean?
like that. I don't because the things they label what needs to be protected are national security or business interests. It doesn't make sense, especially when I don't think that people are that fragile. I think we've been exposed to, we're always exposed to a freaking political scandal like it's no tomorrow. So I don't think that's a big shocker compared to just knowing what's going on, at least in some of these corporations and how much money is going to where. But I think they're afraid that we'll interpret the information wrong, which is like, how would it if we just see like the where the money's being funded to, we can suggest that that's probably where we want our tax dollars being put in.
Yeah, exactly. But I think let me try to spin my camera a little bit. But I think we had a balance, and for a good long time we had a pretty good balance. The only thing the balance is that could be lost right now. But let me give you an example. I'm sure you're about like United Citizens, right? United Citizens. Well, yeah, that particular case is extremely dangerous because that particular case basically what it stands for is that a corporation is a person. A corporation is treated as a person. So basically, the mobile Exxon, those big corporations, they treat it just like you. They should basically the idea is that they should have the same rights as Robbie. They should have the same rights as Reginald Mombrun, the same rights. I mean, it sounds kind of, you know what I mean? This is a multi-billion-dollar companies.
Yeah.
They don't have the same food imprint. And so to me, it's like it shifted a little bit too radically on that side, and I'm not really sure how it's gonna get fixed. I'm not really sure, but
Could I ask what was one area that you couldn't include in your article that you felt like, or it was just an area that is like you obviously you're touching on what I would call a taboo subject only because it's the way that we look at it in society. I don't think it's taboo when you actually have the conversation. But is there one area that you were kind of afraid to research? Because you are, I mean, you work in you're you're doing studies for universities, so I would think like there's one area you really can't touch or you just feel like it might not be important to do so because career wise as well too. I mean, I understand that protection, but is there an area in your article that you felt like you had to leave out because there was some either political ramifications or just something of that sort?
no, I don't remember that. I don't remember any of those kind of thoughts. To be honest, I mean, the reason I'm saying that because first of all, I'm 6 years old, so when you get to be six, thank you. When you get to be 6 years old, so therefore, I mean, in terms of my career, I'm another 10 years that kind of stuff. So if something happened where I would be, kicked out or whatever, and I can't survive that. I'm not a 42-year-old professor trying to tenure, that kind of stuff. So therefore, I was less concerned about that. And that's number one. Number two, when you've been in the academia for a little while, I probably can get a job here and there. I mean, I don't remember any particular area that I was concerned about. And then more importantly, a lot of times when you read those articles, and I was very careful in terms of not naming names necessarily. I was definitely concerned about that, but I wasn't really concerned. For example, I was much more comfortable. What's the guy's name? Alex Asdar. Well, yeah, he works for the FDA, he works for the pharmaceutical company. I'm a tax lawyer. But I mean, me seeing connecting on this path probably not gonna happen. Whereas when it comes to the IRS for tax lawyers, going a little bit more careful because again, these are quote unquote guys that are quote unquote peers. Well, instead of I wouldn't plus in addition to that, it wasn't an article about the IRS anyway. It was an article about the corruption in the government. And again, I wouldn't want somebody that I work with, somebody that I may work with, I wouldn't want necessarily to accuse them of corruption, even though the whole system was corrupt. Matter of fact, it's kind of interesting. There was a young fellow while he was in the IRS, he wrote an article calling for too much corruption in the IRS. That guy was brave. So basically, and he basically named names, and so, but anyway, going back to your question, there wasn't anything that I considered taboo. I didn't.
Was there an area in your article that you would like to expand a little bit more that you felt like obviously you had to wrap the article up at some point? You couldn't just keep writing forever. I mean, you probably could with the amount of stuff that's going on, but is there an area that you would like to expand more? Like if you were going to do another one?
Yeah, that's true. Because what happens is in the beginning of the article, I don't know if the way those articles are written, it's kind of interesting. I got in law school. You
I'm
read
happy
about,
I found it.
huh?
I said, I'm happy I found it.
Yeah. I'm happy you found it too, and that's been kind of a big battle among my peers. That well, when we articles, nobody reads the article. But anyway, so those articles are edited by law students, right? But there's a whole law journal. There's a whole history behind that, right? And the one thing that that took out a little bit is the history. I had a robust history of the pharmaceutical industry, and they kind of took it out, that kind of stuff. And so, so that's the one thing that I think I'd like to explain. That I wish I'd kept it, but they want to take it out, and you get to a point where, if you want to get the article published, want to get it done, that kind of stuff, move on to the next project. But to me, it's like I really believe that if you don't know your history, then you tend to repeat the same mistake. And the history of the medical profession was whole hardly created for profit. It was created for profit. Basically, what happened is there are some people that actually were selling pharmaceuticals. And back then in the 1800s, you didn't have medical doctors.
They had bottles of mercury to cure like snake bites and stuff like that,
Exactly,
which is nuts.
exactly. And this couple of guys, this thing, what we can actually make money by essentially by modernizing it, like I said. And so one of the ways that they actually saw it, they basically saw that there were too many, I guess, what they call cracks. People here and there, for example, Robbie, snake bites. That's your thing. People go to me for snake bites. People go to me for dental removal.
With a crow, they use a crow to pick your teeth.
Exactly. And matter of fact, there's a guy in Haiti. I remember the guy in Haiti. Basically, if he had a tooth that wanted to take out, he put a little powder, and he can literally take it out with his bare hand.
What is in that powder?
Huh?
So what's in that powder is what
I
I want to know.
Nobody knows. But if you had a bad tooth in it, and he was actually very, what's it called? Very useful in Haiti because he had bad tooth. That's decaying. He could put. But anyway, the point really is they wanted to control that whole area, and they literally created the medical profession. They literally created the medical profession, and they created the white coats, all that stuff, and then they essentially through marketing, they basically, well, if you're not a medical doctor, you're a quack. If you're not a medical doctor, so that's how the subject was created. But it was really for the purpose of making money. The whole point was to make money. So that's the part of the history that I find kind of interesting, but they didn't find it as interesting, and they kind of took it out and then okay, fine.
I think if you show a track record in the past that there's been a long history of this same stuff that's going on today, you'll have a lot more people. Like if you're able to make connections, you'll have a lot more people labeling it, or less people labeling it conspiracy because they see that, oh yeah, it happened.
That's what I thought too. But again, the editors they thought the article was just it become too big. They also thought that people would actually lose interest in that. And let me give you a quick example. For example, the police department that we have here in the United States. Well, the whole history of police department, they were essentially created way back then as passes to recover runaway slaves. That was the whole point. And so that kind of changes the morph, that kind of stuff. But that's the history. The history essentially goes to things that pretty much created to really, recapture runaway slaves. And there's a whole history behind that. And like I said, the problem with that is that some people don't really, because I guess part of it also because of a public, the demise of a public education, people don't really care about this kind of things. We're not teaching students how to think. And so they're like, whatever, you know.
I want to ask just probably one last question to you. If you're gonna look at ways that the public can get like kind of move things forward, like some obviously policies from the public's perspective. I mean, talking about it helps, but what would you recommend?
What I would recommend is, yeah, it's kind of tough. I mean, I think obviously politics. People like that, Elizabeth Stevens, those kind of people kind of have a little bit. And in terms of making the public aware of what's going on, you have to be honest. I guess a podcast like this, a podcast like this, people kind of talk about it. But it's a great challenge. But again, the public doesn't want to think things through. They really don't. Matter of fact, there's a big I don't know who said that, but it said in politics, when you're explaining, you're losing. in politics, when you explain your people don't, for example, Republicans, they've been being successful by saying cut taxes. You cut taxes, they're essentially people are going to have more money in their pocket. And if you have more money in their pocket, that means they're going to spend more money. And when you spend more money, the government will make more. I mean, it's a bunch of silliness, but the point really is a very simple way. So if we could come up with something that's actually catchy, something that's catchy. Let me give you another example. The estate tax. Right? For example, if you die with $1 billion, the government just not going to allow you to pass on all that money to your
No,
children
not at all.
at all. Well, and there's economic theory beyond that. It's not necessarily a good thing to hand somebody $1 billion, right? Well, when they went to tax that, they call it the death tax. That's what they call it. It was very catchy. But even after your death, Robbie, the government's still in your pocket.
I know.
That's what they call it, death tax. So what I'm saying is, if you can work on something like that, something catchy. The other problem is people that do this kind of research that I do, they're very serious people. They don't like the catchy stuff. That's what they're fighting about anyway. And so, but it's a little bit of a losing battle. But I would basically say, if you can find something catchy, anti-big pharma, that might work politically. You know what I mean? But again, people do the kind of research I'm doing, they're not gonna like that because they want real discussions, and I'm not sure you're gonna have real discussions among the public as a whole.
Yeah. Well, Reginald, I appreciate the time you gave me to talk on my show, man. Seriously, I really do appreciate it. Is there a place where people can find, I can link your articles in there, but do you have anything you'd like to promote? Like, if you want to say it to anybody out there listening?
No, I mean, I'm really not a big technology guy, right? Some people have Twitter pages that I don't have that. So yeah. If you like the article, that's actually great. If people want to talk to me about the article, that's fine. People want to talk to me about the whole big pharma industry research, that'll be excellent also.
All right, I'm gonna link your links in the description to the article and everything like that. Even if I find any other links with you, I'll make sure to put in there as well too. And thanks everybody for listening to this episode of Out of the Blank. And stay tuned for next episode.